The 2024 NFL season is just a couple of days away, so in today's video, I want to give you guys 8 different teams that I truly do believe are Super Bowl contenders. Now, before we actually get into the video, I do think it's important that I personally define what I truly do think is a Super Bowl contender. And to me, for you to be a Super Bowl contender, I have to think that you have a top-tier quarterback, a top-tier head coach, and a really good overall roster. And before I actually do hop into the video, I want to give one honorable mention, which will go to the New York Jets. I think they have a top-tier quarterback when healthy. I think they have a top-tier roster. The only thing holding them back is that I just don't know how to feel about Robert Saleh quite yet. So with that being said, if you go on to enjoy today's video, hit the like and subscribe button, but let's get into the video. So for today's video, I have 8 different teams that we will be talking about today, and we are going to begin with number 8, the Houston Texans. Now, when you look at the Houston Texans, they kind of check all the boxes that I talked about earlier. They have a top-tier quarterback, looks to be a top-tier head coach, and a very solid roster surrounding CJ Stroud. And in this past offseason, they brought in some big-name guys like Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter to shore up a couple of different positions that they really kind of didn't need help in the case of receiving room, but also in some positions that they did need help in, such as the edge rushing room. And I think all in all, when you look at this team, there really is not a bunch of holes for this team. I think the only thing that may kind of hold people back, including myself, is the fact that they don't have a ton of experience in terms of winning championships. At the end of the day, CJ Stroud is only a sophomore and they got a lot of young pieces on this team. So I think it will be important that this team manages their expectations properly, as well as putting in proper game plans every single night and every single game to put themselves in the best position to win football games. I do believe the Texans have a good recipe for success, and if they can match what they did last year and improve upon it, I think they'll easily be in consideration for a championship in 2024. Next up at number 7 is the Cincinnati Bengals, and yet again, this is one of those teams that checks off a lot of different boxes on my list. They have a top-tier quarterback when healthy in Joe Burrow, a head coach that I do believe is a pretty solid head coach, and a really solid roster all around. You put all that together and then look back at the history of this team the past couple years. When they are healthy, they're in the deep playoff conversation, and they have actually made it to a Super Bowl at one point. For this team, and I've talked about this multiple times throughout the offseason, if they're going to have the success that they think they can have, they've got to stay healthy. That is truly maybe their only knockback as to why this team may not be true championship contenders, is their overall health, because Joe Burrow just hasn't shown that he can maintain a long season of healthiness in a couple years. Obviously last year had a bunch of injuries, had some injuries in his rookie year, but had some healthy seasons in between. And then you got all the other question marks about health on the defense with Jamar Chase and a bunch of other players. So if they can stay healthy, then I truly do believe they have the recipe for a championship team, but we will just have to wait and see on that one. At number 6, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now in this one, I don't quite yet have every single box checked, but I am kind of anticipating that I will be able to check those boxes, because I do believe that they have a top-tier quarterback in Jalen Hurts, and I do believe that this roster is one of, if not the best overall rosters in the league. But the only checkbox that I'm not really sure if I can check right now is going to be at the head coaching spot, because Nick Sirianni had a really disappointing 2023 season, which is a shame because in 2022 that was a spot that seemingly was going to be checked off. He looked like he was a great head coach, led that team to a Super Bowl. Ultimately, they would lose, but it looked like Nick Sirianni was one of the better young head coaches in the league. And then everything kind of fell apart late last year. We all know the story. I've talked about it here on the channel multiple times. And so for me, it's going to take a couple of weeks before I can definitively say that I believe in Nick Sirianni to be a coach that can lead a team to a championship. I know he's done it once, and hell, that Jalen Hurts 2022 season was magical, and a big part of why was the coaching staff. But I do believe personally that Nick Sirianni has to prove that he's more than just what his offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator were in 2022. He has to prove that he can lead the team sort of by himself. Yes, he has Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, but in a sense, it's on him to really prove that this team can get to that spot. So if they can do that, if they can stay healthy, I think this team is easily a championship contender. At number 5, I have the Green Bay Packers. Now, I know what you guys are saying. No way does Metro have the Green Bay Packers at number 5 ahead of the Eagles and ahead of the Bengals and ahead of the Texans. But in my opinion, I gotta give them the respect that they deserve. I think for each of the teams that I mentioned below, there are a couple of little asterisks that have to be put next to their name regarding if they're championship contenders. For the Texans, it's their youth. For the Bengals, it's their health. For the Eagles, it's their coach. Whereas for the Packers, I don't really have a ton of question marks about this team. Yes, they have a top-tier quarterback, a top-tier head coach, and in my opinion, a really solid roster all around. around. You take all of that and you put into what was a really awesome offseason where they got guys like Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney and shored up some positions on the offensive line, and all of a sudden you're looking at this team and saying this is one of the best teams in the league. Now, am I going a little bit crazy by putting them in my top 5? Perhaps, but I truly do believe that after what was a very impressive run last year in the playoffs, that they have what it takes to get that far. Jordan Love at one point in the season looked like a total bust, and then afterwards went on to have a miraculous second half of the season where arguably had he played like that the entire year, he probably would have won MVP. And as we head into 2024, the expectations for Jordan Love are at an all-time high. He is looking like he's going to be in the MVP conversations, and this team is talented enough to get really far into the playoffs and make that Super Bowl run. So yes, maybe you guys will disagree with me on this one, but ultimately speaking, I'm going to give the respect where it belongs with the Green Bay Packers. I think they have the coaching staff that can lead this team very far and perhaps make it to a Super Bowl. However, at number 4, I'll be talking about the team that beat the Green Bay Packers in the playoffs last year, and that is going to be the San Francisco 49ers. They have, in my opinion, a top-tier quarterback, top-tier head coach, and a top-tier overall roster. Now, yes, Kyle Shanahan has continuously struggled, whether it's in the championship games or in the Super Bowl. He's consistently sort of disappointed and played down to expectations, but I still believe that he's a top-tier head coach. But for me, if this team does want to take that next step into winning that championship, I think a lot of it is going to be on the shoulders of Brock Purdy. Can he take that next step into being an even better quarterback than what he's already done the first couple years of his career? We obviously know that this Niners team has a bit of a history with quarterbacks heading into their 3rd and 4th years with guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and of course Colin Kaepernick. So in my opinion, it's going to be up to a guy like Brock Purdy to kind of beat out the repetition of what's been happening for this team and play a really good year of football. And in my opinion, I do believe that Brock Purdy will be able to do so. So if he is able to do that, I don't really see a reason why this team cannot make it back to the Super Bowl and potentially win another championship to add on to the incredible resume of the San Francisco 49ers. But next up, let's talk about the Baltimore Ravens at number 3. And for this one, again, they check off all the boxes. Each team I'm going to be talking about moving forward is going to check off all the boxes, at least in my opinion. They have a top-tier quarterback, top-tier head coach, and a really solid roster all around. And yes, you can make the argument that this version of this Ravens team is not as good nor loaded with talent as they were last year. At the end of the day, they lost a number of key players, guys like Patrick Queen and Geno Stone and many more on this defense and offense. And as we head into 2024, there's maybe more questions on this team than maybe what we had at certain points last year. But at the end of the day, I still truly do believe that this is one of the best teams in the league. I know there's some question marks with the offensive line and who's going to replace all of those big time stars they lost this offseason. But when you bring in a guy like Derrick Henry, you have a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, and you have the weapons both offensively and defensively to match up with any team out there, I think you have a legitimate chance to make that run. Now, I know Lamar Jackson has not put it all together quite yet in the postseason, but I think at some point he's going to do it, and I would not be shocked at all if it's this upcoming season. But let's go ahead and hop into our top 2 teams. These are going to be 2 teams that I think could easily match up in the Super Bowl. Hell, I think any of the teams I've mentioned in this video, that even includes the Jets as my honorable mention, could make it to the Super Bowl and could be a potential matchup with an imposing conference team. But as it goes for number 2, I will be discussing the Detroit Lions. For this team, they have, in my opinion, a top-tier quarterback in Jared Goff, a top-tier head coach who I think could easily win Coach of the Year this upcoming season, as well as a roster that is, in my opinion, one of, if not the best in the NFL. This is a weird team where they have a combination of younger players and older players that just mesh so well with one another. I think a good example of that is directly in their running back room, where you have the veteran in David Montgomery and the young player in Jahmyr Gibbs, but they work so well and properly next to each other that you really couldn't imagine this running back room being with any other players. They have the talent defensively to finally stack up against some of these potent NFC offenses where they improved on their defensive line, improved in their secondary, added some players, and all of a sudden this is looking like one of the better defenses in the entire NFL. And then offensively speaking, we already know what they bring to the table. I think that this is going to be a team that as they head into the playoffs, they're going to be extremely tested as they have a number of really tough games throughout the season, not to mention the NFC North games where they're going to be matched up against the Vikings, the Bears, and of course the Packers. And I really do believe that each one of those games is going to be super important in determining who's going to win that division and make that super deep playoff run. But I think as we head into the season, the Lions are the obvious favorites for good reason. They got everything, in my opinion, that would classify them as a championship contender. I love where this team is going, and I do believe that at some point they could potentially be hosting up the Lombardi Trophy. But I think we all know who's going to be at number 1. We will be discussing the Kansas City Chiefs. They have a top-tier quarterback in Mahomes, arguably the best head coach in the league in Andy Reid, and arguably the best roster in the NFL. And in this offseason, yes, they lost guys like L'Jarius Sneed, but at the end of the day, they improved in a lot of other key positions, such as the receiving core. To be honest with you guys, I'm really not even that worried about the cornerback room because of how many good players they already have in that position, not to mention the overall defense being really solid and the coaching staff being really freaking awesome. The only question marks I really had for this Kansas City Chiefs team was how are they going to address the receiving room and improve that in a big enough way to potentially put them over the top yet again. And in my opinion, they did a very good job of doing so. They brought in a guy like Hollywood Brown. They, of course, drafted Rashee Rice last year, and he took a lot of big steps late into last year. And then, of course, you bring in the big name guy in Xavier Worthy who can take the top off with his 4.2 speed. And while yes, this receiving core may not have the variety of, you know, somebody who can just play over the top as like a 6'4" monster DK Metcalf type of guy, but what they do have is 3 players that in my opinion can work well in this Kansas City Chiefs offense. Yes, they're a little similar to one another. They're not really built too differently. I know Rice is bigger than Xavier Worthy, but they kind of play similarly. But I do think that's really going to work for this version of Andy Reid's offense. As we know, Andy Reid is a genius when it comes to being a play caller, and he's going to make the right plays to allow these guys to flourish. And when you look at the rest of the league, I really just don't see a team that can maybe take down this Chiefs team in a playoff setting, in a championship setting. I really do believe that unfortunately, they're probably going to win a 3rd championship in a row. I just think this team is really well constructed, and as long as they stay healthy, I just don't see a team beating them when it matters most. But of course, these are just my opinions, and if you guys disagree, you can always let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try my best to respond to your comment. And again, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.